And the guy had just, he hasn't pulled a trigger on a gun in 50 years. He said, I'm ready. So we put our fingers in our ears, gun goes off, nothing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think he missed. And so we sit around, now we're in the classic conundrum. Do we go look for blood, or do we just wait for another deer to come? And so we wait and we wait. 5 o'clock, we decide, let's go look for blood. Go to the place, no blood. And I'm just like, oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe he missed. We start looking around. We look to the left, 40 yards away, doe laying dead. And I'm like, I can't believe it. And I've told him, stay in the stand, because I don't want him walking, because he literally cannot walk with his back. Well, we go into the woods, we're high-fiving, we're pulling the doe out, and here's the old man hobbling down the food plot, because he is determined he's going to find the blood. And we pull, and he said, you're joking, right? You guys didn't plant that deer? And I said, no. And we look at the shot. Well, it turns out the deer wasn't broadside. The deer was quartering away significantly. And if you ask the old man, this is exactly what he was planning to do, is the bullet went in 3 inches behind the last rib and went out through the heart. And he said, what did you expect?
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 230. Robbie Kroger, Why We Are Hunters, Blood Origins. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from Black Ash Outdoor Products. Reduce your risk of tree stand suspension trauma with a Tree Stand Wingman, the Tree Stand Emergency Descender System. The Enforcer. Take control of your odor footprint with your personal ozone generator. The Rack Packer. Don't drag your deer out of the woods like a caveman. Never drag a deer again. No need to kill yourself dragging a deer when there's the Rack Packer. Use the promo code BIGBUCK, BIGBUCK, at checkout to earn free shipping at $23 value. Go to therackpacker.com. Covert scouting cameras. Remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. The Horny Buck Seed Company. It's all about the freshest seed. Morse's Sporting Goods. A full line of sporting goods without the sales tax. Northwoods Common Sense. New England's finest white-tailed deer lures, 100% fresh, pure, and undiluted. And Big Buck merch for only $19.99. You can get a cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirt and show support for this podcast by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/MERCH. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Chancey Walters with Whitetail Adrenaline and Big Buck Ruiner. You're about to listen to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hello, this is Cuz Strickland with Mossy Oak, and you're about to listen to the podcast that I listen to 16 and a half hours nonstop. The Big Buck Registry is the best out there.
Hey guys, this is Tony Caggiano from World Slam Adventures, and you're listening to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. Why do we hunt? Why are we hunters? What makes us tick? For many reasons, these are the questions that we should probably ask ourselves as hunters. These are also the questions that Robbie Kroger has set out to answer as part of his Blood Origins project. Through interviews with hunters and his own experiences, Robbie has discovered that we all have a connection in our roots to hunting passed along from generation to generation, and that oftentimes the connection to hunting is deeper than that. This is what we might consider our hunting heritage. And if you are familiar with this concept, you know what it is. It has a smell, a feel, you breathe it in, and it feels amazing. It is the freedom that hunting provides, and it is freedom that allows hunting to exist. This may seem a bit cerebral at the moment, but I suspect you'll understand it better as we discuss blood origins with Robbie. We'll get to the full interview with Robbie Kroger in just a moment, but before we do, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week, stunned motorists witness deer leap to their deaths. This story is from the USA Today website and was reported by Aaron Young. Catherine Verhusen and her husband were driving northbound along the 80th Street Southwest Bridge over U.S. Highway 30 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa on Sunday when they spotted a herd of deer in front of them. They had hoped the deer would somehow stay away from the oncoming traffic while also not jumping over the bridge's west side. But then the Atkins couple witnessed the lone buck sprint across the opposite side of the bridge and vault over the bridge's sidewall to an estimated 20 to 30 foot drop. The three does followed immediately, all leaping to their deaths. Verhusen was horrified. "I've never seen anything like this," she told the Des Moines Register on Tuesday. "No words, no words." When Ron Lane, a conservation officer with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in Lynn County, left the scene Tuesday afternoon, the three does remained, but the buck was nowhere to be found. He believes the herd was panicked and not familiar with the area. "The bridge there is brand new," Lane said. "I'm guessing the deer aren't used to that with all the construction going on." Additionally, Iowa is in the midst of its second shotgun deer season, which Lane thinks could be another contributor to the deer's disorientation. Nearly 73,000 deer checked during Ohio's weekend gun hunting season. This story is from the OutdoorNews.com website. Hunters checked 72,814 white-tailed deer during Ohio's 2017 week-long deer gun hunting season, according to the Ohio DNR. Last year, hunters checked 66,758 deer over the week-long deer gun season. 2 days, that is Saturday, December 16th and Sunday, December 17th, of the deer gun season still remain. The muzzleloader season is January 6th through 9th, 2018, and the archery season remains open through February 4th, 2018. For more information about deer hunting, please check the 2017-2018 Ohio Hunting and Trapping Regulations. Story behind 31-point upstate New York Deer of the Year changes. It was shot at a fenced preserve. This story is from the NewYorkUpstate.com website and is reported by David Figura. A New York hunter who said he shot a once-in-a-lifetime 31-point buck in late October in Columbia County with his bow was lying. On October 28th, Patrick Craig of Ancrumdale, New York, said he shot the deer on state land in the Taconic Mountains near the New York-Massachusetts border. Craig told NewYorkUp.com this week, however, that he did shoot the deer in late October, but it was actually taken at the private fenced-in Taltine Whitetail Ranch in Norwich, New York. He said he paid for the hunt and took the deer with a crossbow. He said the individual who contacted NYUp.com by email and later was interviewed by phone for nearly 30 minutes was a family member who portrayed himself as Craig. He did not reveal the family member's name. NYUp.com first discovered the ruse as a result of a comment on the Oneida Lake Diehards Facebook page in which a link to the original story was posted. Josh Stewart, who is the son of Kurt Stewart, the owner of the hunting preserve, posted on the Facebook link that he had taken the photo. The son manages the preserve, his father indicated. The father said he warns all customers about passing off deer shot in the preserve as being shot out in the wild for recognition in contests and for recognition by the New York State Big Buck Club. "I hate getting into these kind of predicaments," the elder steward said. "If you check the deer Craig shot, it has holes in its ears for being tagged." Craig apologized for the false tale and that the family member is in a lot of trouble and that rest reassured there will be some consequences for the individual making up this story. Archery deer season extended for 3 urban Michigan counties. This story is from the OutdoorNews.com website. Archery hunters are getting some extra time to pursue deer in parts of southeastern Michigan. The state DNR is extending archery season until January 31st for Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne counties, which together make up the Metro Detroit area and are known as the Urban Deer Management Zone. Officials say the new policy could help cities resolve urban deer conflicts in the heavily populated region. It will be tried for 3 years. All rules and regulations for the archery season will be enforced. Baiting won't be permitted during the extended season. A deer license, combination deer license, license or antlerless deer license will all be valid. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here's Robbie Kroger. Robbie Kroger, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Man, I'm good, Jay. Thank you so much for having me. We're humbled to be a part of a great podcast such as yours.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you and the project that you're working on. I've had some time over the last couple of weeks to cruise through your website, and I started reading your story, and I started digging into more or less your mission statement. And I'm starting to understand what you're doing. It's one of those projects that I think you're going really deep on a subject matter that I see some people try to explore, but it always seems to fall for whatever reason. Never could really understand this because I think we're all in it. There's no question about who's in, who's out. But in order to explain our origins, our heritage, there's a really deep pathway that goes way, way back. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like a lot of videos that we see try to do that, but it kind of falls short. But I have this feeling you're about to do what I see so many try to do and just can't quite capture.
Mm-hmm. You know, Jay, I think it comes down to a couple of tangible things that are essentially a part of everybody. The mission statement, our purpose is fairly simple. Everyone has a story, and that story is one of heritage. It's one of why we are hunters, why we are who we are. What is that fabric that's in our DNA that makes us do the things that we do? And I think that in sort of threaded amongst that heritage, our bloodlines, being who we are, is the story of us. It's the story of, hey, we're not just this heathen bunch of folks that go out and hunt and here's the trophy shot kind of thing. But it's so much deeper than that. And I just felt that there was this void, this space where if we could capture what it means to be a hunter, what hunting means to me, what it means for me to invest that same heritage into my young boys. I've got a 5-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy, or even inspire a person of middle age like myself who's never hunted before to think about hunting. Well, then we've done it. We've essentially achieved what we want from the project, which is, hey, we're not that. The hunting industry right now is sort of at this intersection, this crossroads, and that if we don't change, we're already heading into a place where we don't want to go. And Blood Origins really is a storytelling documentary that shows the heart of who we are as hunters. And it's a way to reach across the aisle to the non-hunting mainstream America and say, this is who we are. This is our blood origin. This is the fabric of who we are as hunters. And I really appreciate the words. And we're just humbled and we're just humbled at the response of what we've been seeing thus far with Blood Origins.
What drove you to explore this? Yeah,
it really starts with my story, and I think that's the sort of essence of Blood Origins. Is my story is unique to me, but it's a classic story where my heritage, my family is steeped in hunting tradition.
Okay,
I can go back to, and we will explore this a little bit, my grandfathers and my great-grandfathers on my father's side. So my mother's side there's no hunters there. They're from Australia. There's not really much hunting involved in that side of my family. But my father's side of the family, my great-great-grandfather, and maybe this will be a podcast for another day, but I have this picture that was taken in 1925 of my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather. Both of them were foresters in the Sachsenwald in northern Germany.
Okay.
And these foresters were essentially the initial conservationists of the forest. They were the guys that were at the time put in charge by the prince of that area, and they were in charge of the wildlife. They were in charge of the resources. And so they were conservationists / hunters. And so I have these guys that have sort of, I see it as like the one side of me, the conservationist side of me, because I was a professor in the Wildlife Fisheries Department at Mississippi State University. I have a big habitat management restoration part of my life that really is my day job.
Gotcha.
And then I have this other side of my family, which is my grandfather, who hunted essentially as a hunter-gatherer for the family when he was in northern China and Russia, where my father was raised. Essentially lived, in one of his stories, he describes that he was fortunate enough to live in the two major hunting paradises that this world had to offer. The first hunting paradise was the Siberian tiger, Mongolia steppe, where he hunted upland birds, stags, you name it, he hunted it. But at one point in his life, he was hunting as out of necessity to feed his family.
Wow.
Then he moved the family on a business opportunity to then Portuguese East Africa, now called Mozambique, and they immigrated there in the 50s.
Yep.
He stuck his family on a boat, took 3 months to go from London all the way to Lorenzo Marques at the time, and then lived the heyday of Africa. And when I say the heyday of Africa, my father was a camp boy, and he was just retelling a story the other day where his job was he was the first person to wake up every morning in camp, and him and one of the community leaders would go out of camp, a couple of 100 yards, find a herd of impala. They would kill an impala that morning. He'd bring it into camp. That was his job. And they would take the liver out of that impala, and they would eat fresh liver. All the hunters would get up that morning. They'd eat fresh liver and onions and garlic for breakfast before they went out.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, the other part to that story is that they said that they would wean themselves off garlic 1 week before they went back, because these were 3.5-week expeditions out into the African wilderness.
Right.
And they had to wean themselves off garlic. And even when they walked in the door, the women folk that had stayed home at that time were just like, wow, you guys reek. You absolutely reek of garlic. But that's my story. So unfortunately, revolution occurred in Mozambique in 1974.
Okay.
Hunting was curtailed. Everything was taken away. Guns were taken away. And then I grew up in South Africa. And South Africa, a lot of people are listening to this and thinking, well, geez, this guy lived in Africa, man. There's so much wildlife running around in Africa. Well, there's not. It's all behind fences. It's all geared to an American market. A blue-collared South African, there's no public hunting seasons. There's no public ground to hunt. If there is public ground, there's nothing on it. There's no licenses. And so I never grew up in the hunting tradition like my father had grown up with my grandfather. All I really got were the stories. All I got were the trophies on the wall. And so let's fast forward now, essentially 25, 30 years. I've arrived in America. I got a PhD in biology, live in the sort of restoration management side of wildlife and restoration and ecology. And now get to experience essentially, if you listen to the first episode of Blood Origins, I get to essentially experience, I guess, what my grandfather got to experience in Mozambique, but I get to experience it here in Mississippi.
Right.
And it just seems so contrary, but it is. That's me. That's what I'm getting to live.
Let's go back to your mom.
Yeah.
She's from Australia. I always envision Australia as a very almost African type area with lots and lots of wildlife and hunters. But that wasn't the case on your mom's side.
I would say that I would say the first half of your statement is correct. Lots of wildlife, lots of invasive wildlife,
right?
But not many hunters. And the reason being is that, and you know this better than anybody, the gun control laws in Australia are probably the strictest that they are in the world right now.
Okay.
As I understand it, you have to apply for a rifle.
Okay.
So bow hunting, though, is getting more and more popular in Australia.
Yeah, that's the one I think of, like bow hunters.
Yep.
Okay.
Getting a lot of press, and actually one of the guys leading the charge right now, I'm sure you've heard of his name, Adam Greentree. Mm-hmm. And so he's one of the big Aussie bow hunters that is leading the charge over there.
Okay.
So
gotcha. So no hunting heritage on your mom's side.
No, none at all.
But on your dad's side, boy, what a rich, colorful past relative to hunting and really in the history of the modern world. I mean, it sounds like you're right in the thick of, or your grandfather, your great-grandfather, right in the thick of World War II and having to avoid socialism and dictators and Nazis.
And he thought he escaped it when he went to Mozambique and then went through his last revolution.
Right. So in 1974, the Mozambique went through a revolution of their own.
That's right.
And that there wasn't a fight for when they came to get the guns. There was no fight.
No, there wasn't, because you were either going to lose your life or give your guns up.
Wow.
And so I'll give you just a side snippet story. In the late 90s, my grandfather is now in his middle 80s. Had made enough contacts. The war was over now. Mozambique was trying to get back on its feet. My grandfather still had this deep down desire to hunt that essentially was, still ingrained in him. And he just knew the right people. And Africa being Africa, you just had to grease the right palms. And he got taken to this massive white metal framed warehouse with this white roll up door that had sort of rust built into it. They rolled up the door and he walked in and he said what he saw was from floor to ceiling, 20-foot ceilings, guns piled.
Wow.
As far as your eye can see. And lots and just, guns rusted everywhere. And the guy said, pick one shotgun. And so he just went and he found a shotgun that had obviously been lovingly wrapped up in Hessian burlap, soaked in oil. Somebody had really taken care of thinking that they were going to get their gun back.
Yeah.
And out he walked with his shotgun, slipped it in the back of the Land Rover and drove away. Not 2 weeks later, him and his... It's a crazy story. Him and his buddy decided they're going to go back to the duck hole that they used to hunt pre-revolution.
Yep.
So out they drive in their Land Rover. They make their way through the reed swamp. They settle in pre-dawn. As they're waiting for the birds to come in. The chauffeur that took him out there, the guy that had helped him down, because this is an 86-year-old man trying to tromp through swamps, right?
Right.
To get back to hunting. And the guy, the chauffeur said that they didn't see a single duck that morning. And naturally so, everything has been literally eaten out of the landscape there from a poverty perspective.
Right.
But they could not see the water because the mosquitoes were so thick.
Wow.
3 weeks later, he developed malaria.
Right, of course. Wow.
And survived. Look, the old curmudgeonly fool survived malaria, but who does stuff like that, man? Especially, mid-80s. The desire must have been deep.
It was very deep, and rightfully so. I mean, once you've hunted and it's part of your life, it's always in there. Mm-hmm. And you yearn to do it again, and things sometimes get interrupted.
That's right, and that's what he was after. He was so desperate to go hunting, and you asked the question, what started this all, and I gave you a little bit of a taste of my heritage, but really what started it all was when I was 16 years old. There was a trip planned. Myself and my grandfather, we were going to plan this trip, and I had recently just watched a video by Theodore Roosevelt's, I think Theodore Roosevelt IV, and it's actually called In the Blood, where he went to Kenya and he used the double side-by-side rifle that Teddy used to kill a buffalo, and he killed when he was 16. And I told my grandfather at the time, I said, I really am interested in hunting. And this is a 16-year-old version of me. And he wrote me a letter. And I've still got the letter, and it's in front of me right now and in plastic. But it's on one of that old school rice type paper.
Yeah, right.
And I've still got it. It's in great condition. And the beginning of the story, and this is the date on this is November 19th, 1992. Dear Robbie, it was indeed a surprise to hear that you're keen to become a hunter. It must be in the blood. And that's sort of just, I've still got it. And that's the centerpiece of now what I'm trying to infuse in my boys. It's in them. It's in me. It was in my grandfather. It is in my father. So,
do you feel that in some families, there's a hunter and a borderline anti-hunter? Do the hunters always win out in those families?
I don't think so. I think this speaks to the heart. Now we're going to start getting deep right now, but
Yeah.
I think this speaks to the change, right? I think this speaks to our industry. Essentially, you could take what you just talked about and blow it up to the hunting and the anti-hunting establishment. And maybe back in the day, hunting won out. Today, I'm not so sure that that's the case anymore.
Okay.
And I think that the reason being is that, this is just me and it's just my opinion, but I think today hunters are stuck in a rut in that we like what we like to see in terms of the trophy shot and, the blood and whatnot. And that's all a part of who we are as hunters, no doubt. But is that something that we have to come out with right off the bat and say, this is who we are as hunters? Because I would hanker a guess that you, Jay, I know me, Robbie, and the most of your listeners, that if pressed, if really asked, what is it about hunting that makes you want to do it, or that makes you proud to be a hunter, they're going to pause just like I just paused, and they're going to not say, oh, that bloody knife shot or the trophy shot. They're going to say something else.
Yeah. That part of the hunt, for me and probably most hunters, is not the most important part of the hunt.
Exactly. And I think that's forgotten.
I have had friends that ask me, why do I hunt? And it's always like this self-inflection. Like you always pause like you did. And you ask yourself, why do I hunt? Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I'm like, why do I do that? Why do I have this like inner craving to just pursue game animals? I go to the grocery store. It's not really necessarily about the food, although I enjoy knowing that I harvested the game that I put on my table.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that though that the answer in a classic scientific manner is it depends. In some instances, it is about the meat. Some instances, you are really interested in filling your freezer, and that is a legitimate reason to hunt.
Right, but there's more to it than that.
Absolutely,
I can't just say, "Oh, it's to fill my freezer." No, it's not just that. It's not even close to just that. I would say it's not that at all.
That's right. Because how many times? And I think this is the key statistic, and I'd love somebody to crunch these numbers. How many hunter days are spent in the field in which nothing is brought home?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That should speak more to who we are as hunters than anything that we kill.
Yeah, right. The hours that you put in learning, studying, understanding the species in which you're chasing for 3 to 5 seconds worth of opportunity to put the kill shot on.
Yep.
It can't be about the meat.
No, absolutely not.
It can't necessarily even be about the trophy.
Nope.
There's more to it.
Yeah, and I would argue that when you bring in a younger generation into the mix, what you just described, the learning, the behavior, the ecology, the understanding, the patterning, that often is a very much solo hunter activity, right? Of you, maybe a friend understanding that hit lister or that property.
Right.
But when you bring your boys along, then or your daughters along, or your father or grandfather along, then it becomes, then you almost switch into a whole new side of why we hunt, and it's more about relationships, and it's about meeting the creator where the creator wants you to meet him. It's connecting with that person in a very quiet manner. Our lives are so noisy nowadays. Imagine what life was like just think back what it would, sitting in the middle of the Mozambique bush for 3.5 weeks.
Right.
This is the this is the 60s. There's nothing.
Right. There's something spiritual about finding a place in the world where you can hear no cars, you can hear no people, you can hear no dogs barking, and it's in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. But it's a spiritual event, and I would go there just to go there from time to time, just to get away. Has nothing to do with hunting. In fact, sometimes I go for walks in the middle of deer season without carrying a weapon. Mm-hmm. More for this peace and quiet, but I'm never not studying the landscape. I'm looking.
Learning.
I'm learning. I'm trying to figure out the puzzle. And a friend of mine said to me the other day, he took work off so he could go out, and he's really not hunting most of the time. He's scouting most of the time. He's out in the woods. He's learning. He's processing. He's trying to figure out the patterns. And I said, well, yeah, that's where the answers are. That's where all the answers are. So if you, the more time you can spend in the woods studying the species, then the hunt almost comes naturally. Yeah,
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So Bloodlines has some deep roots in your family on your dad's side. A revolution in Mozambique in 1974, leading to the confiscation of firearms, taking away a hunting heritage, a pause in something that's rich in a lifestyle, so that there was no hunting available except for the story that you told me about. So what happens after you said that there was a blue collar inability in South Africa to hunt, and it's all very commercialized now. Is there any, I mean, to me, that would almost be cause for another revolution in a sense. Is there any like animosity there?
There isn't. And I just, I never was raised, I was raised in a town called Johannesburg, South Africa. So Johannesburg is 8.5 million people.
Wow.
So I was raised in a very much, megalopolis type environment, and even though I had a very strong hunting heritage, it was just never talked about. Even the trophies that we had, it just was never. I was never engaged in it, and I think one of the reasons I was never engaged in it was that opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, in South Africa, obviously it was gone in Mozambique. You don't even think about it, but in South Africa, we didn't have friends who had big private ranches, and those private ranches would have had animals on them because they would have been fenced off, and you would have had poachers kept out of those properties. And a lot of those properties were doing two things. One of those properties were either growing animals to sell to other properties or hunting those animals, and we just never had access to, or I never had friends who had those types of farms. And so that was one aspect of things. But South Africa's gun laws, essentially, it's a quasi middle state model between what Australia is like today and what, a lot of people worry about America trending towards, in the near future. And I essentially lived it, so I've got some good experience. When I was still in South Africa, I came to the States in 2003, so we're talking late 1990s. I had a license for my two weapons. I had two rifles. I had a Seiko 270. That was my grandfather's Safari Plains game gun. And I had a license that said Seiko 2.70. And when I wanted to go target shooting at the local rifle range, and there were gun clubs around, I would have to go to the gun shop. And this isn't the typical gun shop, multiple layers of security to get in, first of all.
Sure.
And then you would have to, there was this big black book on the counter, I remember, and we would open it up, and you'd have to scribe your details of your license into that book. And only then could you, and you had to show your license, and you could only purchase ammunition for the caliber of weapon that was on your license. And so you would get your box of 270 ammunition. And I'm not talking about a brand new box of federal ammunition. I'm talking about a box that is beaten up, right? This box has probably been there for 20 years.
Right.
And you'd get your ammunition. You can go off and do what you needed to do. When I came to the States in 2003, gun laws slowly started changing in South Africa. And so I'll give you another story. My grandfather had a side-by-side shotgun, 12-gauge shotgun, manufactured by Davidson.
Yep.
It was the shotgun that he bought in northern China in the 20s. It was branded. The stock was branded with essentially a hot brand to license the gun. It was the gun that he used for pheasant hunting, upland bird hunting. Took it with him to Mozambique, smuggled it out of Mozambique before the revolution hit, and my father had it. And it was the gun that I used for the only real hunting I did in South Africa, which was pigeons and doves on a sunflower field from a nuisance species perspective.
Wow.
But that gun was licensed in my father's name. And so with the gun laws changing, we couldn't get it into my name. And the gun laws then had changed to a point where you had to have a safe in your house bolted to the floor. The police had to come and check that safe was bolted to the floor. Well, one, that you had a safe, and then two, that it was bolted to the floor. 3, you had to pay license fees on that weapon every year. And then you also had to jump through a proficiency test with that weapon every year, which cost you money too. And so essentially what was happening is hurdles were being put in place for gun owners to essentially legally own any weapons. I actually returned to South Africa in about 2004, 2005 to try and to get my 270 Seiko out in a 375 Holland Magnum. Luckily, I got them out of the country, legally imported them into the States. Yeah. But at that time, I was worried that I couldn't get them out. And I said to the gun shop owner, I said, hey, would you be willing to purchase these two weapons from me? And he essentially laughed in my face. And I said, why are you laughing? And he said, let me show you something. And he walked me back to the safe. And there must have been thousands of guns in his safe. Wow. And he said, these are all the guns that have been given up. Nobody wants to own weapons anymore because it's just too burdensome to own any weapons. And so you take that part of it, right? The gun laws, the lack of opportunity to, either purchase a gun, learn how to shoot guns easily, plus the access to hunting. And, Jay, it's probably spinning in the back of your brain, but hey, those two topics seem to be very relevant topics in the hunting world that we live in America right now.
Right. What a world. What a different world. So you came to the United States in 2003.
That's right.
And what brought you to the United States?
I came to do a PhD. I'm a swamp guy by nature. That's my specialty is wetlands. And came specifically to do some work in wetlands and agriculture, and did a PhD at the University of Mississippi, and finished my PhD. Then married a girl that's a lot more smarter than I am. She's got her PhD in 18th century Gothic literature.
My goodness! Wow.
So the more blood, guts, and gore in a movie, the better. And she's 5'0", blonde hair, blue eyes. So. And we then were fortunate enough to get hired by Mississippi State University in the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture, where I was a professor there for 6 years. And my job today, I actually, between Mississippi State and my job right now, the BP oil spill happened.
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard about that.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to know the right people, and I was hired as the first chief scientist of the federal entity that got born out of that oil spill. And I stood up the restoration framework from Texas to Florida for how to implement restoration as a result of the BP oil spill.
Wow, no kidding.
And today my job is to do the same work on behalf of the state. And I live a dream job from a scientist perspective, helping the state of Mississippi implement really large ecological restoration projects.
So your life has changed quite a bit.
The Lord has certainly blessed me.
Yes. The gun laws are.
I will say that I have fully embraced the Second Amendment.
Yeah. And rightfully so. If I were starved as you were, I would embrace that wholeheartedly. Wow.
I'll tell you a funny story, Jay. I took my wife and the two boys out to dinner just down the road here, a little beach shack, beautiful fish tacos. And I was trying to convince my wife over dinner with the two boys that I needed to buy another gun. And I told her, I said, there's this 2.2. It's a beautiful little handgun. It'll be perfect for you, Lisa. My wife's name's Lisa. Yeah. It'll be perfect for you. And I wish I had my phone out, and I wish I would have recorded it, but I guess I wouldn't have gotten the innocence of the moment. But my 5-year-old boy turns to my wife and goes, Mom, you don't have a gun? and Lisa's like, no, I don't, Leo. And Leo's my oldest, who's the namesake of my grandfather. He's named after my grandfather. And he goes, but Mom, how are you supposed to shoot the deers?
Good question.
He followed that right up without any prompting. How are we supposed to eat?
There you go.
And I was just like, cheering inside. My heart was bursting with pride. It was amazing. What a boy.
That's fantastic. So you're a busy guy. You've got a whole world in wildlife and restoration. When did you decide to launch this project? I can see how you got there. Mm-hmm. But what was the trigger moment?
Yeah, so we've been, I guess my wife and I have been talking about it for a good year and a half, and I'm not the most patient of guys, Jay, and this project certainly needed patience. It needed we really needed to unpack what it was that we were actually going after, and really needed to, get our vision locked down about how we wanted to express who we are as hunters, and essentially using my story as the fulcrum to launch us. And I was talking to a number of individuals that are close to me, and I actually got in contact with two guys that I said, I want you guys to be a part of sort of essentially the pilots of Blood Origin. So I had to build these pilots that were, this is the type of story that I want to capture. And so mine was obviously a pilot. My story was a pilot. And I reached out to a friend of, actually a student of mine at Mississippi State that became a friend of mine after he graduated, a guy called Lake Pickle. And Lake, their episode actually dropped today, but Lake is now a videographer for Primo's Hunting.
Right.
And Lake's story, if you haven't seen the episode, I guess I'm talking more to the audience as well as you, Jay, but his story is incredible. And the person that sort of started it all for Lake is essentially a mentor of his, Keith Polk. And so I engaged Keith as well. And Keith didn't know me from a bar of soap. I didn't know Keith from a bar of soap, but it's just one of those guys that when you meet him, you hit it off like a house on fire. And we recorded that was one aspect. So to get the stories was one aspect. And then I had to find the guy that would bring my vision to life. Mm-hmm. The videography, the cinematography of what we wanted to show. I needed to find that guy. And lo and behold, he was literally in my backyard. And he's a young guy with just amazing vision, an amazing eye. And I told him, I met him for lunch. And again, this is just, it's all part of the story, right? I met him for lunch when I first met him. And I took him out to lunch. He was a young guy. I spoiled him. I wanted to wine and dine him. And he had just quit his job that morning.
No kidding.
And I said, you're doing this full time now? He said, yep, I'm going to give it a go. I said, okay. I said, this is what I want. And I painted him what I wanted to see, how I wanted it captured. I didn't want the standard interview. I wanted to bring the audience into that person. I wanted the audience to feel and resonate that person's story, feel, tug on their heartstrings, punch them in the gut. And when he filmed my pilot, and essentially the other trick was we film these stories in locations that are meaningful to the individuals that we're filming.
Okay. All right. Because
that then it allows them to draw those emotions out of what that story means to them. And so you can imagine, well, where's that place for me? That place is South Africa.
Right.
But I'm not taking anybody back to South Africa. I have no money. And so we had to recreate Africa in essentially Stone County, Mississippi, and it actually turned out beautifully. We did a whole fire scene, and it was in the middle of the summer, so it was like 100 degrees. I kept having to, wipe the sweat off my forehead and whatnot.
Right. I watched that episode.
Oh, I'm glad. And then that was the start, and then we just started touching people, saying, "What do you think? Are we onto something?" And one of the people that I touched was a friend of yours, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.
Sure, Cuz.
And I showed Cuz, and Cuz was the pivot. Mm-hmm. Cuz said to me, he goes, "Robbie, all of these stories are great, but your story's crazy." He said, "You need to tell everyone else's stories through your eyes."
Right.
Just given your background and the pause in your heritage and how it's ingrained in you, you've just got a different perspective in how you look at other people's stories and how you look at the hunting industry and how you look at what it means to everybody. And that just, the sort of Lego pieces all gelled and locked down together.
Yeah.
And then we built it. And we've built 2 episodes thus far, and the reaction has been humbling. And we've got some great stories still coming, and we just can't. Again, the word that I keep using is humbling, because it's unbelievable, the response.
Okay. Tell me about the first couple of episodes. The first one was the trailer, which is more or less your story.
That's right.
Tell us about the other 2, the one that launched a little while ago and the one that launched today.
Yeah, so we've got a trailer about Blood Origins, which is just giving you an idea of what it is. And, it opens up by saying, if somebody had to ask you what Blood Origins is, the answer is simple. It's not what it is, it's who we are. And I think that's just a moniker for what Blood Origins is. So the trailer really gives you an idea of the brand, the purpose, what we're after. Introduces you to me. It introduces you to my boys. Introduces you to some pictures of my heritage. And then it leads into episode 1, which is essentially my story. It captures the letter. It captures my grandfather, who he was. And then it leads into what it means to me today to be a hunter in America, what it means to me to invest in my kids, to be able to explore the public lands, that what we, essentially what I don't take for granted. I think a lot of people do take for granted, just given that they haven't lived in a situation where I've come from.
Right.
And so that's what episode 1 is about. It's sort of an introduction to me. It's an introduction to who I am, the narrator of Blood Origins. And then the episode that dropped today is poignantly titled Threaded. And it's a story of Lake Pickle and Keith Polk, sort of hunter-mentor relationship. And it's just it's one of those stories that is rare in its interconnectedness. Keith took Lake when he was 12 years old to kill his first turkey. Yep. Lake then matured into this die-hard turkey hunter who now is embedded in the upper echelon of the hunting industry, filming for Primos. Keith is very much still engaged with Lake from a friendship, mentor, relationship perspective. But then Lake himself bore witness to Keith's 2 older boys, Caleb and Colin, killing their first turkeys in 2016 and 2017 and filmed them for Primos.
Wow.
And so now you have Lake essentially over Colin and Caleb, infusing into them what Keith infused into him when he was a small young boy.
Gotcha.
That's an amazing story. I'm even getting goosebumps just retelling it to you.
What other, and maybe you can't let the cat out of the bag yet, but what other kind of stories can we expect down the road?
You're going to, I think, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I will say that we are after capturing the diversity of what hunting means to hunters, and maybe hunters that haven't been hunting for a long time. So there are known individuals that are coming that are very well known to the hunting industry.
Okay.
And we are trying, and the message there is simple, that people may know them, but they don't really know them. They've never really spoken their heart the way that we're trying to capture their hearts from a hunting heritage perspective. I will give one little tidbit of an episode coming that we have filmed a learn to hunt coordinator for a state. That learn to hunt coordinator is female, which is interesting to start with. That learn to hunt coordinator is Korean.
Wow.
And that learn to hunt coordinator only started hunting 2 years ago.
Okay.
So just a fantastic, unique, we think we're going to title that Unconventional Story.
Very interesting. When you were saying about going deep and learning from their perspective and really honing in on a heartfelt, deep message, it reminds me of a podcast in a lot of ways. We get to go deep, and really explore some thoughts and inner secrets that sometimes you don't even think about yourself if you're sitting there.
Well, I think that's the beauty of it, right? Is that, and I think you would echo this. I feel privileged standing there behind the camera, listening to the story. It's like I've been let into this person's world, and a very emotional world at that, in terms of the way that we're capturing things and getting to know their family, getting to know them on a level that most people don't ever get to know them on. And it's humbling. It's gratifying. It makes my soul sing in terms of how the message and the story, and being able to then tell that story to the mainstream America.
Yeah, there's something very special about that, and they have to be willing too. Like that's an intimate part of themselves that they're letting you pull back the curtain and take a look at.
Yep. Yeah, they do. They and we prep, and we sort of, I like planting seeds. I plant a lot of seeds in terms of questions weeks before we actually get together with them. And we talk about what we're going to talk about, and we engage. But you're right. What we've found is that there are some that it comes just naturally to. Here's my story, and out it comes, and you're like, whoa, and we capture it in 20 minutes.
Right.
But there's others that probably just like a podcast host. There's others that you have to pull a little bit.
Yeah.
You have to.
You have to.
Hey, let me scratch over here. Let me scratch over there. Okay, we've just unveiled this. Can I just probe a little bit here with a question or two? And then you start getting to the gold, and
Right.
you start looking around and going, are we actually filming this?
Got to tease it out of them a little bit.
That's right. Yeah.
So now that you're involved heavily in this project, has your perspective changed at all from the day you came to Mississippi in 2003 and realized what the United States was like? Have you had any revelations about what life is about, what hunting is about, or was that all pretty much ingrained in your head?
No. I have gone through the classic transitions of a hunter in that, I was born into hunting in Mississippi. Come on, I've got to be a redneck hunter at heart, right? So that was me. That was me. I was with my best mate who's 6'5", 260 pounds, and I went to Walmart and I got my bibs, and that's how I started my hunting career. And it was all about the kill, and that's what we were going to do, and that's all I knew, because at the time I hadn't ever explored that side of who I was as a hunter. Yeah. I was naive. I was young. I was, mid-20s, and probably where most mid-20 type hunting guys are, Right. But now that I have boys and I'm married and, mid-30s, thinking a little deeper, to me, as we explored earlier in this podcast, that hunting, that shift has occurred in me. It's not about going out and making sure I'm killing something. Now it's more about investing in my boys, or because I'm so busy, investing in just a little bit of time aside in the stand where I'm just, meeting the creator and sitting there and listening and breathing and learning.
Right. It sounds like you've had some pretty deep experiences out there.
We've had, I would say, for being such a young hunter, because I'm a very young hunter.
Yeah.
I only started really hunting, I would say 2005, 2006. I've been fortunate enough to have some amazing experiences out in the woods, some humbling, some absolutely frustrating. But I am still very much a hunter that needs to grow. And I think it's imperative for me to continue to grow, because it's only going to serve my boys in a good capacity. Yep. If I continue learning, because I don't know anything, and so I have to keep learning to ensure that they become the hunters they need to become.
Right, gotcha. Well, let's transition that into a little bit of your own personal experiences. You said you've had some great experiences out there and some frustrating experiences, and I was wondering if you could tell us a memorable deer story or a deer hunting story.
I will tell you one, and it literally happened a week ago.
Okay.
So I am fortunate enough right now to have my parents here from Australia. Mm-hmm. My father is the one that you see in a lot of the photographs. He was the camp boy in Mozambique. When he was 16 years old, he was given a Cape buffalo as his 16th birthday present. It's the father and son safari. I have a whole chapter of stories written by my grandfather about that hunt. That was pre-revolution Mozambique, 65, 66. My father hasn't hunted since pre-revolution Mozambique. And so one of the wants and desires that I had for him when he was here was I wanted to take him hunting. And we went up into North Mississippi, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to go hunt with Cuz Strickland. And I said, can I bring my father along with me? And Nice. He said, oh, absolutely, bring your father. And my father has some severe back pain issues, and some other blood disordered concerns that is probably going to limit his lifespan. And so it was just a special hunt from that side of me and what the meaning for me. And the guy had just The guy he hasn't pulled a trigger on a gun in 50 years.
Okay.
And we went into a ground blind, just, stock standard 415, out come a bunch of does. I've never been as nervous as I've been in that stand. My binocular hand is shaking. I'm saying, can you see her? Can you see her? He's got glasses on. He's trying to find the doe through the scope. I'm like, all right, she's just turned. Is she broadside? Yes, yes, yes. And I'm just, hoping and praying that she is broadside because she's just now stepped behind a bush. I said, just tell us when you're about to shoot because he's just going to shoot. He said, I'm ready. So we put our fingers in our ears. Gun goes off. Nothing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think he missed. And so we sit around, now we're in the classic conundrum. Do we go look for blood or do we just wait for another deer to come? And so we wait and we wait. 5 o'clock, we decide, let's go look for blood.
Yeah.
Go to the place, no blood. And I'm just like, oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe he missed. We start looking around. We look to the left, 40 yards away, doe laying dead. And I'm like, I can't believe it. And I've told him, stay in the stand because I don't want him walking because he literally cannot walk with his back. That's how bad his back is.
Right.
Well, we go into the woods, we're high-fiving, we're pulling the doe out, and here's the old man hobbling down the food plot because he is determined he's going to find the blood.
Right.
And we pull, and he said, you're joking, right? You guys didn't plant that deer? And I said, no. And we look at the shot. Well, it turns out the deer wasn't broadside. The deer was quartering away significantly. And if you ask the old man, this is exactly what he was planning to do, is the bullet went in 3 inches behind the last rib and went out through the heart.
Perfect shot.
And he said, what did you expect?
It's only been 50 years.
And it's just amazing, right? 50 years, the guy has, it's still in his blood, and just a memorable hunt. Just from a meaning perspective, it was with Cuz. Cuz just to him, that is going to stick in Cuz's memory. It's just multiple aspects of it. So that's the deer hunting story. It's a pretty good one.
That is a good one. It's like riding a bike.
Yep, exactly.
Get right back on. That's awesome. All right. I've got 10 rapid-fire questions for you.
Okay.
And I have not prepped you for these, so.
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Patience.
Excellent. We all have these things that kind of drive us crazy when we go into the field and we forgot this one item in the truck or at home.
Binoculars.
Yeah, binoculars. That's a very common answer. That's very cool. All right. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Ignorance.
Excellent. How old are you today, Robbie?
I am 39 years old, but if you asked one of my friends, I'm in my 40th year.
40th year, right.
But I'm 39.
Okay. Let's cut that almost in half. What would you tell the 20-year-old Robbie Kroger, knowing what you know today?
Just in terms of life or hunting?
Yeah, in life.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Okay.
Life is a lot bigger than what you think it is.
You're at a hunting convention somewhere in the world, and a stranger comes up to you and asks you what you do for a living. What would you tell them?
Ooh, tough question. I would say that I am a restoration specialist.
Okay, all right. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Smoothie.
A smoothie. Healthy.
Healthy, very healthy. Protein powder, fruit, almond milk.
Wow. Okay. You get a blank billboard on the side of a highway. It's all yours. It's blank. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
Follow your heart.
Very nice. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
My father, given how he raised us, and who we are today as men.
And the fact that he's a crack shot after not pulling a trigger for 50 years. Phenomenal.
I'm not going to give him that. That was pure luck.
Pure luck, okay. What's a typical day in your life look like?
Up at 4, in the gym till 5, in the office at 6:20, out of the office at 5, play with the boys until bedtime, work and engage with the wife until about 9-ish, 9:30, back to bed, do it again the next day.
Wow, all right. Not a lot of sleep for you.
Not a lot of sleep.
All right. And then finally, what's a hunting day in your life look like?
I would say I would love it to look like that I could spend as much time as I possibly can in the landscape that I'm hunting. But more often than not, it's a quick hour and a half in the deer stand whether I see anything or not is immaterial.
Okay. All right. And I understand that. I do. Excellent. All right, those are the 10 rapid-fire questions, Robbie.
Great.
Where can we find more information about your project and what you have going on? Where can we watch episodes and read more about your project?
Yeah, so simple website, bloodorigins.com. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram @BloodOrigins is our handle. Facebook @BloodOrigins. Everything pretty stock standard. You look for Blood Origins. You can find us on YouTube as well. We're just starting, but we've got a bright journey in front of us.
Excellent. All right, I'll be tuning in to Blood Origins to find out. I really enjoyed the episodes I've watched so far.
Good.
And they're not overwhelmingly long either, and they really tell that story in the right amount of time.
Perfect.
So
that's what we were aiming for.
I appreciate that instead of carrying on something that didn't need to be overtold or undertold. It's perfect.
Yeah, who has 20 minutes nowadays, man? Let's get to the point.
Right.
9-10 minutes, easy enough to watch during your lunch hour.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, definitely, I would tune into those. So excellent, and I appreciate your time, Robbie. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on. Your story is absolutely fascinating, and as Cuz said, it's crazy. It's a crazy story, but it's there's so many messages there. Like just don't. I think sometimes we take our lives for granted here in the United States. Don't realize what it's like around the world and how good we have it here. And
you are exactly right.
How precious it is, and how much it's worth fighting for. For that lifestyle, and it gets overlooked sometimes.
Well, the honor's all mine too, Jay. You're doing a great thing with this podcast. I hope that the listeners got what they expected out of this podcast, and we need to do it again someday. I'm sure we'll have a couple more stories to talk about in a couple of months' time.
I agree. And you're welcome anytime.
Appreciate that, sir.
Well, thanks to Robbie Kroger for coming on board and explaining to us what Blood Origins is all about and what he's trying to pursue there. I think it's very interesting to see how he's going about his interviews and finding what connects a generation to another generation and how hunting gets passed along and how you can almost skip a generation, yet somehow Robbie, from his own experiences, found hunting once again, knowing full well that it was part of his heritage, that his grandfather's grandfather, way back to, we're all hunters. And somehow, despite not being able to hunt much where he grew up, felt this need and a desire to get plugged in, to feel that heritage, to feel that freedom. And he's never looked back. So he is now exploring to see if there's more evidence of this, because the stories that come with this type of generational passage of freedoms and hunting heritage are really strong and powerful and important messages to all of us as hunters. It's what drives us now to keep these messages moving forward. Now, Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week?
Yeah, Jay, absolutely. And I'm digging kind of deep into my magic bag on what I do late season. And
the Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Obviously the snow is starting to fly in most areas. And down south, you're not going to see that snow, but just something for the snow folks that are hunters. Maybe you've stayed out of your woods all year and you haven't went in and seen what's going on. That snow is a great educator. It allows you to see where deer movement is without actually getting deep into the movement areas.
Right.
I like to go in with a good pair of optics and kind of get into the woods and work the outskirts, maybe get a couple 100 yards into the woods and kind of work my way around a little bit and see where different trails are. And, this snow is going to educate you where that major corridor, highway, whatever you want to call it, it's going to allow you to be able to get a visual on that without leaving a huge scent trail. Good pair of rubber boots or a good pair of snow boots that are, try to be as scent free as possible. And you make that venture in there and check out where they're traveling, and you might be able to see a bedding area with a good pair of optics, like up on a ridge or on the hillside, or just be gentle with it. Be careful. You can move around as long as the snow's not too frozen and crusty. You can get in there and move around and be pretty much silent in the snow, fresh snow especially. But use it as your advantage and get in there and try to see what's going on. And maybe you have to make a few adjustments over to a different hillside where you see the activity of the deer. If the deer are eating acorns in the woods right now, they're going to absolutely be tore up like a hog's been in there, rolling around and snorting and rooting. Just take time and figure out where the deer movement is and how do you need to adjust for late season.
That's a great tip. It's I can't say how important it is. Now we've got like some snow in New Hampshire, good 6 inches of the white fluffy powder, and how revealing that snow is to the actual corridors that these deer are using. It is like a template. It's like you just made a template for where these deer are moving. It's undeniable. It's unmistakable. You cannot mistake it for anything else. You can learn a ton about not only what deer in your area, but what other game are moving through, and specifically what tree, for example, they like to hug around on their trails. Right. It's unbelievable how revealing this stuff is right now. If you're not out there in the next 2 weeks as the snow's flying, you've missed a very important piece of what next year will be. So.
Yeah, it's definitely an educational device. The snow is, and a lot of times where I see a mistake made is these deer will actually, around here we got a lot of cedars and there's pine thickets where you're at, Jay. When that snowstorm's coming in, these deer in Ohio, they get up underneath these cedar thickets.
Yep.
And they make a bed. It's an obvious bed, and you're going to be able to pick it out as soon as you see it. You'll know exactly what it is. Now, keep this in mind that sometimes in cedar thickets where you see that bed, when that storm comes in, they go into them thick cedars. That may not be their bedding area. That may just be that really thick, safe zone for that storm cover, and then they're going to branch back out to where they normally would hang out. So that snow is going to be able to allow you to see the activity from the cedars to another thicket or possibly a bedding area. Or you just got to be able to visually see. Usually when a snowstorm comes in, there's one tracks leading out of the cedar thickets here. Now, once you get beyond that cedar thicket, then it's time to see where them tracks are going in and out, in and out, in and out. That's when you get educated.
Right. Right.
When they walk away from the one time bedding area for the storm to come in, that's where they hung out where the storm hit, and then they get back to their normal pattern and go to their bedding area. They're going to educate you. They're going to let you know which way they're headed. You could look at their feet tracks in the snow. It's going to tell you a whole lot about what's going on in your woods.
Right. And you can do this in the woods. You can do this from out of the woods. You can do this in your car.
Yep.
You can learn a lot from a very short amount of time. I bet I found 12 new hunting spots that I never even never dawned on me that these would be good deer hunting spots just today, just driving around.
It really is amazing that with the snow, there's a spot where I would have never dreamed that there was such a major road crossing for the whitetail here by the house. And man, once I figured that out, there's got to be 20, 30 deer crossing this thing because it literally is 12 foot wide and burn up. I mean, it looks like you went through there and put salt down where these deer are crossing. I had no clue till 4 or 5 years ago. I was driving down the road. I'm like, why is that all burnt up for right there? And I seen it one day, and next day I slowed down. I said, oh my goodness, those are all deer tracks.
Yep, it's crazy.
It's crossing back and forth. It's amazing what the snow will educate you with.
It is some of the best education you'll get. And some of those spots that you find, you kind of thought that was the case, but this is the confirmation that you needed. So don't waste any more time. If it's snowing where you are, get out there. And if the snow's not too deep where they're starting to yard up and they're still kind of in their natural moving patterns, now's the time because it's a very small window before they go to yard and from where they are coming off their natural patterns.
You could take a drive, let's say you're hunting one particular place. That's all you got permission or access to, and drive a mile in each direction down that road or around the block. it's going to tell you where them deer are going, coming, have been, where they're not. There's all kinds of places that you drive down the road and you say, man, I bet there's a lot of deer in there. Well, the snow will educate you if there are deer crossing the road or moving around, or you can look out in the field and see. Especially, I think open fields and deer. It's just amazing how you can get a good pair of binoculars out there and glass across that field, and you can see tracks everywhere. If there's a lot of deer there, they're going to tell you and visually show you that they're there.
Yeah, you'll find them just with binoculars. It's that good. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you, or you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Blueberry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.